The little girl stopped in front of me before her mother had made it halfway across the old train depot. She was 7, maybe 8, with a silver paper star pinned crookedly to her dress from the reunion photo booth. She looked at my name tag, then at my face, as though she had been comparing the two for years. Behind her, Evelyn Dawson went perfectly still. The girl reached into her pocket, pulled out a tiny brass key, and held it toward me. "Mom said you'd know what this opens." I did, and in that moment, 12 years of silence became heavier than the entire building. Before I tell you what the key opened, subscribe if you enjoy stories about second chances that arrive when people have almost stopped believing in them. And tell me in the comments whether you have ever gone back to a place you thought you had left for good. My name is Lucas Hale. I was 31 years old that autumn, and I lived in Harbor Ridge, Michigan, a town shaped like a bent thumb along the edge of Lake Huron. I restored wooden boats for a living, not the expensive kind that spent their lives under canvas in private marinas, but old fishing boats, family runabouts, and weathered sailboats that carried more memories than resale value. I had been engaged once, 5 years earlier. It ended kindly, which was almost worse than anger, because neither of us could point to a villain. Since then, I had become very good at repairing things that belonged to other people, and very careful about promising anyone I would stay. The train depot had not seen a passenger since before I was born. Harbor Ridge High rented it for the all-alumni reunion because the gym was being renovated and because everyone in town loved pretending an abandoned station was romantic instead of drafty. White lights had been strung along the beams. Old class photographs covered one brick wall. A local jazz trio played beneath the clock that had been frozen at 9:17 for 40 years. I was there because my sister, Natalie, had threatened to put my name on the volunteer list if I did not attend. She had graduated 2 years after me and believed reunions were proof that time had passed without asking permission. "You can stand in the corner and judge everyone's shoes," she had said. "But you're going." So I went. Then Evelyn walked through the door. She was 27 now, exactly 4 years younger than me, but I still saw the 19-year-old woman who had spent one bright summer helping me rebuild a cedar skiff behind my father's shop. That summer, I was 23, newly home from a marine carpentry program, convinced I had all the time in the world. She had just finished her first year of college and was working at the bait shop near the harbor. We had fallen in love with the kind of certainty only young adults possess, when every feeling seems permanent because you have not yet lived long enough to learn how many things can change. Evelyn had married someone else 3 years after I left Harbor Ridge. Her husband, Andrew Dawson, had died 18 months before the reunion. I knew that much from Natalie. I knew he had been a civil engineer. I knew there had been an accident on an icy highway outside Grand Rapids. I knew Evelyn had returned to Harbor Ridge with her daughter at the beginning of summer. What I did not know was whether she remembered me with tenderness, regret, anger, or not at all. Now her daughter was holding out a brass key I had filed smooth with my own hands 12 years earlier. I took it carefully. "Where did you get this?" I asked. The girl looked over her shoulder at Evelyn. "My mom keeps it in a blue box," she said. "She said if I saw Lucas Hale, I could ask him." Evelyn reached us then. She wore a dark green dress and a thin gold chain at her throat. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, brushing her jaw, and grief had changed her face in ways that did not make her less beautiful. It had made her expressions more deliberate, as if every smile had to pass through a gate before she allowed it out. "Ruby," she said softly, "I told you to wait until I was with you. You were walking slow. I was trying not to spill the punch." Ruby considered this, then looked back at me. "Do you know what it opens?" "Yes," I said. Evelyn's eyes met mine. "Hello, Lucas." "Hello, Evie." No one had called her that in my hearing for 12 years. The name escaped before I could stop it. Something moved in her expression, not quite pain and not quite relief. Ruby pointed at the key. Well? Evelyn took a breath. It opens a storage compartment on a boat that no longer exists. That is not exactly true, I said. She frowned. What do you mean? The boat still exists. The jazz trio slipped into a slower song. Around us, people laughed too loudly over old jokes and greeted classmates they had ignored when they were 17. Evelyn stared at the key in my hand. You told me it was sold, she said. I thought it had been. Ruby leaned closer, immediately interested. What kind of boat? A little cedar sailboat, I said. Her name was North Star. My father had bought North Star from a retired teacher for $800 and told me I could keep whatever profit I made after restoring her. Evelyn and I spent 10 weeks replacing ribs, sanding planks, sewing cushions, and arguing about paint. I wanted navy blue. She wanted white with a thin red stripe. We compromised on deep green with a cream deck. Inside the forward locker, behind a brass latch, we had hidden a small blue box. It held 2 photographs, a movie ticket, a pressed beach flower, and a letter neither of us was supposed to read until our first anniversary. We never had a first anniversary. The morning I left for a job in Seattle, I gave Evelyn the key. By the end of that week, she had stopped answering my calls. By the end of that month, I had decided I knew why. Standing in the depot, I realized I had spent 12 years treating my guess like a fact. Evelyn looked towards the old photographs on the wall. This may not be the best place. No, I agreed. Ruby tugged on her mother's hand. Can we see the boat? Evelyn closed her eyes for half a second. Ruby. What? You brought the key? That almost made me smile. Evelyn saw it, and despite herself, the corner of her mouth lifted too. North Star is in my workshop, I said. At least most of her is. What happened to the rest? Ruby asked. Time, I said. And water. They're both hard on wood. Ruby nodded with the solemn understanding of a child filing away a useful fact. Evelyn held out her hand for the key. I placed it in her palm. Our fingers touched for less than a second, but the contact carried a memory my body recognized before my mind did. I didn't give it to her so she could ambush you, she said. I wasn't ambushed. You looked ambushed. I usually look like this at reunions. That earned a real smile, small but unmistakable. Then a man from my graduating class called my name from across the room, and Natalie appeared beside him, waving us over toward the group photograph. The moment broke, but it did not disappear. Evelyn slipped the key back into Ruby's hand. Keep it safe, she said. Ruby closed her fingers around it. I always do. As they walked toward the photographer, I stood beneath the stopped clock and understood that the key had never been lost. It had been waiting. The group photograph took 15 minutes because no one could remember which graduating year belonged in which row. Ruby stood in front with the other children, holding the brass key against her dress. Evelyn stood 2 people away from me. Each time someone shifted, we ended up closer, until our shoulders nearly touched. The photographer raised his camera. Everyone looked like high school was the best time of your life, he called. It wasn't, Evelyn said under her breath. I glanced at her. Still hate forced enthusiasm, more than ever. The flash went off while I was smiling at her instead of the camera. Afterward, Natalie took Ruby to the dessert table with a speed that told me she had planned it. My sister had never believed in subtle intervention. Evelyn and I moved toward a quiet section near the old ticket windows. Rain tapped against the tall glass panes. Outside, The depot platform shone beneath the streetlights. "I should explain," she said. "The key? All of it, eventually." The word eventually carried both invitation and warning. "I'm not asking you to explain tonight, I know." She folded her arms. "That makes it harder." "How?" "Because I expected you to be angry. I was angry 12 years ago. And now? Now I'm old enough to know anger can be built on bad information." She looked at me sharply. "What information did you have?" "None, really." That was the problem. Before she could answer, Ruby returned with a plate holding 3 cookies and a brownie. Natalie followed, wearing the innocent expression she used only when being manipulative. "Ruby wants to see the old signal room," Natalie announced. "I volunteered to take her." "I did not say that," Ruby said. "You were thinking it." Ruby looked at her mother for permission. Evelyn sighed and nodded. "Stay with Natalie." "I will. And no climbing. I only climb things that look safe." "That sentence does not help me." Natalie led her away. Ruby looked back once, not at her mother, but at me. Evelyn watched her go. "She has been asking about the key since we moved." "Why did you bring it tonight?" "I didn't. She found it in my purse." "You keep it in your purse? I was taking it somewhere tomorrow." "Where?" She hesitated. "Your workshop." The answer settled between us. "I've driven past 3 times," she continued. "I couldn't make myself turn in." I could picture the road along the harbor, the faded sign above my gate, the gravel lot crowded with boats on stands. I could picture her slowing down, seeing my truck, and continuing. "You could have called. I could have done many things 12 years ago, too." There it was. The first acknowledgement that the silence had belonged to both of us, even if neither of us yet understood how. I leaned against the ticket counter. North Star came back to Harbor Ridge last winter. A marina owner found her behind a storage shed in Alpena. The man who bought her from my father died, and nobody knew what to do with her. Her hull was split, mast gone, half the fittings missing. But you recognized her. I recognized your red stripe under 3 layers of bad paint. Her eyes lowered. "Our red stripe." "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know you were back. You could have found me." "That is also true." She nodded once, accepting the point without excusing either of us. "What are you doing with her?" she asked. "Restoring her when I have time." "Which means slowly. Is the locker still there?" "The front panel is. The latch is corroded. I haven't opened it." Her gaze lifted. "Why not?" "Because I don't have the key." We both looked toward the signal room, where Ruby's laughter echoed above the music. Evelyn pressed her lips together. "You could have drilled it. I restore things. I don't destroy original hardware unless I have to. That sounds exactly like you. I'm not sure whether that's a compliment." "It is." The announcement for dinner ended the conversation. We sat at different tables, but I felt her presence across the room like a second source of heat. During speeches, the principal talked about community and memory. A classmate who now owned 3 dental offices gave a toast to people who had made Harbor Ridge proud. I watched Evelyn cut Ruby's chicken into smaller pieces. Once, she looked up and caught me watching. Neither of us looked away immediately. Near the end of the night, the reunion committee auctioned donated items to raise money for the school arts program. I had contributed a weekend sailing lesson and the repair of 1 small wooden boat. Evelyn contributed an architectural watercolor Andrew had painted of the Harbor Ridge lighthouse. When the auctioneer mentioned his name, the room became careful. Evelyn sat very still. Ruby reached for her hand. I saw grief pass between them without words. It reminded me that whatever had existed between Evelyn and me, Andrew was not an obstacle in our story. He had been her husband, Ruby's father, a man whose absence was present at the table. Any feeling I had for Evelyn would have to make room for that truth, not compete with it. When the event ended, rain had become a hard autumn downpour. I found Evelyn and Ruby beneath the awning, waiting while Natalie searched for their coats. "Where did you park?" I asked. "Across the lot. I'll bring my truck around. We can walk." Ruby has paper stars pinned to her dress. They're dissolving. Ruby looked down. One silver point had already folded. "That is serious," she said. Evelyn gave in. As I drove them toward Evelyn's mother's house, Ruby sat in the back seat and asked questions about North Star. "Does she have a bathroom?" "No." "Then she's not a very useful boat. She's useful for sailing." "What if you need a bathroom while sailing? You plan ahead." Ruby considered this unsatisfactory. At a red light, Evelyn looked at me. She inherited Andrew's need for complete information. "I like complete information." "Yes," she said. "You always did." The light turned green. Her mother's house stood on Birch Avenue, a pale two-story home with a porch wrapped around one side. I remembered waiting at the curb there when Evelyn was 19, pretending I did not want to impress her father. Now, a child's yellow rain boots sat beside the door. Ruby climbed out, then leaned back into the truck. "Tomorrow?" she said. Evelyn frowned. "What about tomorrow? We're going to see the boat. We did not decide that." Ruby looked at me. "Did you decide?" "I think that decision belongs to your mother." Ruby turned to Evelyn with such patient expectation that I had to look away. Evelyn rubbed her forehead. "After lunch, 1 hour?" Ruby smiled. 2, 1, 1.5. Evelyn stared at her. "Andrew negotiated for municipal contracts," she said to me. "This is his fault." Ruby shut the door before her mother could revise the agreement. Evelyn remained beside the open passenger door. Rain blew beneath the porch light, catching in her hair. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For returning with a 7-year-old who carries private objects into public places. She seems efficient. She is terrifyingly efficient." I smiled. Then the smile faded. "Evie, you don't have to come tomorrow. I know. And if the box is still inside, you don't have to open it. I know that too." "Then why are you coming?" She looked past me toward the dark line of the harbor. "Because I have spent 12 years wondering whether silence was the answer," she said. "I would like to know what the actual answer was." She closed the door and walked into the house. I drove home through the rain, with both hands tight on the wheel. The next morning, I arrived at my workshop before sunrise. The building had once been a net warehouse, long and low, with cedar siding gray from weather. Inside, boats rested on cradles beneath hanging work lights. The air smelled of sawdust, linseed oil, and the lake. North Star stood in the far bay. She was only a hull then, stripped to bare cedar, patched along the port side, her deck removed. The green paint remained in small islands near the stern. The cream deck beams curved like ribs. I had seen her every day for 9 months. That morning, she looked less like a project and more like a witness. At 10 minutes past 1, Evelyn's car pulled into the yard. Ruby jumped out first. She wore overalls, red sneakers, and a knit hat with fox ears. Evelyn followed more slowly, carrying the blue box. I knew it before she reached the door. The paint was chipped at one corner. I had made the box in my father's shop from scrap mahogany. Evelyn had painted the lid blue and added a white star that leaned slightly to the left. She stopped inside the workshop. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Ruby saw North Star. "That?" she asked. "That," I said. "She looks broken. She is being repaired." "Those can look the same for a while," Evelyn said quietly. I met her eyes. "Yes," I said. "They can." Ruby circled the hull twice before asking permission to touch it. When I told her she could run her hand along the sanded section, she did so gently. "It's smoother here," she said. "That part is ready for sealing." "And this part? Still needs work." She nodded as if the boat had passed an inspection. Evelyn remained near the entrance, holding the blue box against her coat. "You took it out," I said, "the day after you left." I wiped my hands on a rag. "Then you opened the locker?" "Yes." "What did you find? This box, nothing else?" Her face changed. Was there supposed to be something else? The workshop seemed to lose every sound except the ticking of the old wall heater. I walked to North Star and crouched beside the forward compartment. The corroded latch was green around the edges. Evelyn handed me the key. It resisted at first, then turned with a soft, metallic click. Ruby leaned over my shoulder. The locker door opened. Inside were dust, a broken pulley, 2 dried leaves, and a narrow cedar shelf darkened by age. I reached under the shelf and felt along the back edge. My fingers found paper. For a moment, I could not move. The envelope had been protected inside an oilcloth sleeve I had stitched from an old sail cover. The sleeve was stiff, but intact. I pulled it free and set it on the workbench. Evelyn stared at it. Her name was written across the front in my handwriting. "You never found this," I said. "How could I have found it? I told you the key opened everything I couldn't say. You told me the key was for the locker. It was both." "That is not both, Lucas. That is a riddle. I was 23. You were impossible at 23. "I know." Ruby looked from one of us to the other. "Are you fighting?" "No," Evelyn and I said at the same time. Ruby considered us. "You sound like you are." Evelyn set the blue box on the bench and opened it. The hinges gave a familiar squeak. Inside lay the pressed white flour, now brown at the edges, 2 photographs from the Harbor Festival, a movie ticket, and 1 sealed envelope. My name was written on it. "You wrote one too," I said. "Of course I did. You never sent it. It was an anniversary letter. We did not have an anniversary. We might have." She looked at me, and 12 years compressed into one sharp breath. The summer we spent together had ended with a choice. I had been offered a position at a boatyard in Seattle, the kind of apprenticeship people waited years to get. Evelyn was returning to college in Ann Arbor. I asked her to come west after her semester, not forever, just for the summer, so we could decide what we were becoming. She had said she needed time. I had heard no. The night before I left, we put our letters in what I thought were separate hiding places. Hers went into the box. Mine went beneath the locker shelf because I wanted her to discover it after she took the box home. The letter said I was willing to return. It said Seattle was an opportunity, not an escape. It said I loved her enough to build a plan instead of demanding a promise. She never found it. 2 days after I left, my father sold North Star to cover medical bills he had not told me about. Evelyn had already removed the box. She called me 3 times that week, but the number I had given her belonged to the temporary housing office, and I had been moved to another building after a plumbing failure. I saw no messages. I emailed her. She had changed her address after her college account was compromised. I did not know. She sent a letter to the Seattle boatyard. I had been transferred to a restoration crew in Port Townsend before it arrived. None of those failures should have lasted 12 years. Pride made sure they did. "What did you think?" I asked. Evelyn's voice was quiet. "I thought you had taken your letter back." "Why would I do that?" "Because I said I needed time. Because you left before sunrise without waking me. Because your father told me the boat had been sold and you had known for weeks." "I didn't know." "I know that now." I stared at her. "How?" "Your father told me before he died. My father had died 4 years earlier after a long illness. Evelyn had attended the funeral, but I had been delayed by a storm in Chicago and arrived after the service. I remembered seeing her name in the guest book. He asked me to visit him," she said. "He apologized. He said he had been ashamed about the debt and angry that you were leaving. He wanted someone else to feel abandoned, so he told me you had planned the sale. By the time he admitted it, I was married to Andrew and pregnant with Ruby. I sat on the edge of the workbench. My father had been a complicated man, capable of tenderness, resentment, loyalty, and cruelty, sometimes in the same afternoon. I had loved him. I had also spent much of my life recovering from the way he treated fear as something to pass down. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "What would it have changed then?" "The truth." "Yes," she said, "but truth can arrive after the decision it was meant to guide." Ruby had gone very still beside the boat. Evelyn noticed and softened her voice. "Sweetheart, none of this is your fault or your responsibility." "I know," Ruby said. "But is that the letter?" She pointed to the oilcloth sleeve. Evelyn looked at me. "I don't know if I can read it. You don't have to. Do you want to read mine?" I looked at the sealed envelope in the box. For years, I had imagined answers from her. Anger, indifference, a polite farewell. I had never imagined that the answer had remained sealed, too. "Not today," I said. Relief and disappointment passed across her face together. Ruby picked up the brass key. "Then why did we come?" Evelyn gave a tired laugh. "That is an excellent question." I looked at North Star. "Maybe to decide what happens to the boat." Ruby's eyes brightened. "We fix it. It takes months," I said. "Maybe longer." "We have months." Evelyn touched her daughter's shoulder. "We do not know that." Ruby looked up. "Are we moving again?" The question changed the room. Evelyn knelt so they were eye level. "I haven't decided. There is a job in Detroit. It would be good work. You said Harbor Ridge was home." "I said it used to be home." "Can it be home again?" Evelyn's composure slipped. "Not dramatically. Just enough for me to see how tired she was of making decisions that affected 2 lives. "I'm trying to figure that out," she said. Ruby looked at North Star. "Fixing her could help." "Boats do not decide where people live." "No," Ruby said. "But people fix boats where they live." I turned away, pretending to check a clamp, because the child had found the center of the problem before either adult was ready to name it. Evelyn stood. "What would restoration cost?" she asked. "In money or time?" "Both. In money, more than she is worth. In time, every Saturday until spring if we work steadily." "We?" I faced her. "You helped build her once. I sanded badly and argued about paint. You also shaped the replacement tiller, with your hands over mine." Ruby made a face. "That sounds dangerous." "It was," Evelyn said. "But she was looking at me." I felt the old pull between us and the immediate need to respect the life she had lived since. Attraction was simple. Timing was not. "We can keep it practical," I said. "You and Ruby come on Saturdays. I'll show you what to do. No pressure about the letters." Evelyn studied me. "Why would you do that? Because North Star should sail again. That is not the whole reason. No. Are you going to tell me the whole reason? Not while you're deciding whether to leave. Her expression tightened. That sounds like pressure. It's the opposite. I don't want my feelings used as an argument for where you raise your daughter. And what if I want to know your feelings before I decide what my life looks like? Then ask me when the question is about me, not Detroit. For a moment I thought I had gone too far. Then Evelyn nodded slowly. Saturday, she said. 10 o'clock. Ruby raised her hand. Can I use tools? Some tools, I said. Sharp tools? No. Hot tools? No. Loud tools? Possibly. She smiled. Evelyn picked up the blue box, but left my envelope on the workbench. You should keep that, I said. I'm not ready. It has waited 12 years. So have you, she said. Then she took Ruby's hand and walked out. The oilcloth sleeve lay between my chisels and a jar of brass screws. I did not open her letter. Not that day. The first Saturday, Ruby arrived wearing safety glasses before she got out of the car. They're Andrew's, Evelyn said. He kept them in his toolbox. Ruby pushed them up her nose. Dad said eyes don't grow back. He was right, I said. Evelyn watched me answer. I had the sense that every mention of Andrew created a test no one had designed. The wrong response would be to become uncomfortable. The worst response would be to pretend he had never existed. So I showed Ruby how to sand with the grain, and when she told me her father had taught her to measure twice, I said he had given her good advice. Week by week, North Star changed. We replaced 2 cracked ribs. Evelyn learned to steam thin lengths of oak and bend them into place. Ruby labeled jars of screws in handwriting that leaned uphill. I repaired the centerboard trunk, while they stripped paint from the rudder. We ate lunch on overturned crates. Usually soup, Evelyn brought in a metal thermos and bread from the bakery near the courthouse. Nothing about those Saturdays was dramatic. That was why they mattered. Evelyn and I stopped speaking only through the careful language of people discussing the past. She told me about her work designing accessible public spaces. I told her why I had left Seattle after 7 years and opened my own shop. She laughed more often. I learned the sound Ruby made when she was trying not to ask a question, and the exact moment Evelyn needed quiet instead of reassurance. In December, the first real snow covered the harbor. We worked with the doors closed and an electric heater humming beside the boat. Ruby was painting sample stripes on scrap wood when Evelyn found me looking at the sealed envelope she had written 12 years earlier. She had brought it back the week before and placed it beside mine. Are we being ridiculous? She asked. Probably. We know what happened now. We know the mail failed. And our courage. That too. She stood beside me at the workbench. Andrew knew about you. I waited. Not every detail, she continued. But enough. I told him about that summer before we got married. I told him there had been someone I never properly said goodbye to. How did he feel about that? He said everyone brings unfinished rooms into a marriage. The important thing is not pretending the doors aren't there. That sounds generous. He was generous. She smiled, and grief softened it without erasing it. He was also jealous for about 3 days and asked far too many questions about your shoulders. I laughed before I could stop myself. Evelyn laughed too, then covered her face with one hand. I cannot believe I told you that. What did you say? That they were average. They were not average. I was protecting my marriage. Ruby looked up from across the room. What are you talking about? Wooden shoulders, Evelyn said quickly. Ruby stared at us. That is not a thing. No, I admitted. It is not. Later, while Ruby swept sawdust, Evelyn told me the Detroit firm needed an answer by January 15th. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want a life that is not only a reaction to losing Andrew." "That seems fair. I also want Ruby to feel secure. Harbor Ridge is the first place she has slept through the night consistently since the accident." "That matters." "It does. But staying because she is afraid is not the same as choosing a home." "No." She leaned against North Star's unfinished deck. "You make it difficult to argue with you. I'm trying not to argue. That is what makes it difficult." We stood close enough that I could see a fleck of sawdust in her hair. I wanted to remove it. I kept my hands at my sides. "Ask me," she said. "Ask you what?" "The question you said should be about you." My heart began to beat harder. Before I could speak, Ruby dropped the broom. The handle struck the concrete with a crack. She was staring at us, frightened in a way that had nothing to do with the noise. "Are you going to marry my mom?" she asked. Evelyn went pale. "Ruby, because if you do, we can stay." The hope in her voice was too large for the room. Evelyn crossed to her immediately. "Sweetheart, Lucas and I are friends. No one is getting married. But you like him. That is not the same thing. You smile here." "I smile other places. Not like here." Evelyn closed her eyes. "Get your coat. We're going home." "I didn't do anything. You didn't. I just think we're done for today." Ruby looked at me as if I might overrule her mother. I would not. "Listen to your mom," I said gently. Her face closed. She took off Andrew's safety glasses and set them on the table with painful care. Evelyn packed their things without looking at me. At the door, I said, "Evie, wait." She turned. This is exactly what I was afraid of. "What is?" "Letting something feel good before I knew whether it was real? Ruby has already turned you into an answer. I didn't ask her to. I know. That makes it worse. Don't punish yourself for her hoping. I am not punishing myself. I am protecting her. From me. From another person disappearing." The words landed harder than she intended. I saw regret immediately, but she did not take them back. "I have been here every Saturday," I said, "for 2 months. And where were you 12 years ago?" I went still. Evelyn's face crumpled for a second. "That was unfair." "Yes, but it is also what I think when I'm scared." I looked past her at Ruby waiting in the car, her small face turned toward the window. "I can't prove I'll stay by promising it in a workshop," I said, "and you can't make Ruby safe by refusing every future that might hurt." "I know." "Do you?" She pulled her coat tighter. "I need time." This time I understood the sentence for what it was. Not a rejection, not a promise, but a boundary. So I nodded. She left. For 3 Saturdays, North Star waited untouched in the far bay. Evelyn did not call. I did not drive past her house. I worked on customer boats and told myself restraint was maturity, though some nights it felt exactly like the old fear wearing better clothes. Then, on January 12th, a windstorm tore loose part of the workshop roof. Rain and snow blew through the opening before I could cover North Star. Water soaked the workbench. When I reached the letters, my envelope was dry inside its oilcloth sleeve. Evelyn's was not. Blue ink had begun to bleed through the paper. I stood there holding 12 years of words as they disappeared. Then I did the one thing I had been too afraid to do. I opened it. The letter was not poetic. That made it worse. "Lucas, I am angry that you asked me to follow you as if my life here were luggage. I am more angry that part of me wants to. I love you. I do not know whether love means leaving with you, asking you to come back, or trusting that we can survive 1 year in different places. I only know I do not want silence to choose for us. If we reach our anniversary, remind me that I was brave enough to write that. Evie, I read it twice while snow melted through the broken roof. Then I drove to Birch Avenue. Evelyn opened the door wearing her winter coat. A suitcase stood in the hallway. "You're leaving," I said, "for Detroit. The final interview is tomorrow. Then I'll be quick." I held out her damp letter. Her face lost color. "You opened it. The roof came apart. The ink was washing away." She took the pages with both hands. "I'm sorry," I said. "But I'm not sorry I read it." Ruby appeared at the end of the hall, holding the brass key. No one spoke for a moment. Then I looked at Evelyn. "I loved you when I was 23, I said. "I loved you badly in some ways, quietly, proudly, expecting you to understand things I had not said. I don't want to love you like that now." Tears stood in her eyes, but she did not look away. "I am not asking you to reject the job," I continued. "I am not asking you to make me a reason to stay. I am telling you that if you go to Detroit, I will call. I will visit on purpose. I will not let distance pretend to be an answer. And if you stay, I will not confuse being nearby with being brave. What are you asking for?" she whispered. "One honest chance. Slow enough for Ruby. Honest enough for us. With room for Andrew, because loving you means making room for the life that made you who you are." Ruby pressed the key into her palm. Evelyn looked down at it, then back at me. "I accepted the interview," she said. "Not the job. I know. No, you don't. I accepted it because I was afraid staying would mean I had chosen you before you chose me. I'm choosing you now." Her breath broke on something between a laugh and a sob. "You always arrive after the difficult part. I'm trying to improve my timing." Ruby stepped forward. "Can I say something?" Evelyn wiped her cheek. "You usually do." Mom put the suitcase by the door, but she didn't pack her green dress. Evelyn stared at her daughter. Ruby shrugged. "It's her favorite." I laughed softly. Evelyn did too. Then she crossed the distance between us and took my hand. She did not kiss me. Not then. That mattered. The moment was not a finish line. It was an agreement to stop letting fear write conclusions. She went to Detroit the next morning. She turned down the job 2 days later. Not because of me, she made clear, but because the position required travel she no longer wanted, and because Harbor Ridge had offered her a different possibility. The town council needed someone to redesign the old waterfront library for accessibility. Andrew had once sketched ideas for that building. Evelyn wanted to finish something connected to him while creating work that was wholly her own. We began dating in February. Slowly meant slowly. Dinner once a week. Sunday walks when Ruby was with her grandparents. No promises to Ruby that adults had not first discussed privately. When she asked whether I was staying forever, I told her I planned to be there tomorrow and would keep making that choice honestly. She said that was not a full answer, but she accepted it. North Star touched water in May. We painted her deep green with a cream deck and one thin red stripe. Ruby added a small silver star inside the cabin where only we could see it. Evelyn and I opened my letter the night before the launch. It said nearly the same thing hers had said in different words. "I love you. I am afraid. I want us to decide together." 12 years late, we finally answered both letters. On launch day, half the town gathered at the harbor. Natalie brought a bottle of sparkling cider. Ruby wore Andrew's safety glasses on top of her head because she said launches required official equipment. Evelyn stood beside me at the tiller as North Star caught her first wind. "Do you regret opening the letter?" she asked. "No. Do you regret waiting so long?" "Yes." She looked across the water. "Me too." Then she took my hand. A year later, I asked Evelyn to marry me on the same boat, but not with the old brass key. That key belonged to the first story, the one built from missed messages and unfinished courage. I gave her a new key to the workshop, where we had added an office for her design practice and a small desk for Ruby. Evelyn said yes. Ruby asked whether that meant she could use the loud tools. I told her we would discuss it when she was older. Today, I am 33. Evelyn is 29. North Star sails every summer. Ruby keeps the original brass key in the blue box beside both letters, the movie ticket, the pressed flower, and a photograph from the reunion. In that picture, everyone is facing the camera except me. I am looking at Evelyn. For years, I believed our first love ended because one of us had chosen to leave. The truth was less dramatic and more painful. We had allowed silence, pride, bad timing, and other people's decisions to speak for us. The second time, we chose differently. Not perfectly, not without grief, not by pretending the years between us had been empty. We chose to ask, to answer, to make room for the people we had become, to understand that loving a widow did not mean replacing the man she had lost, and loving again did not mean betraying him. It meant accepting that a heart can carry memory and hope without diminishing either one. And it began because a little girl with a crooked silver star looked at me across an old train depot, held out a brass key, and said her mother knew I would understand. She was right. Thank you for listening. Subscribe if this story meant something to you, and share in the comments whether you believe some doors remain closed only because the right person is still carrying the key.